to discuss building a more diverse community in Magic the Gathering. We wanted to have this panel for a really long time, and I'm so glad we're finally making it happen. So with that, I'm going to kick it off down the line, and if you just want to give your name and your handles, and what do you do? Who are you?
Who am I? That's a deep question. I have a frog in my throat apparently, and I ate it.
I had a great time.
Great. Okay. So, my name's Ariel. I go by Airbubbles Cosplay online. I've been in the game industry as like a professional for a really long time. I've played video games for a very long time as well. And I guess the biggest thing I've been doing is working with a group called She Sparks, which is, there's a couple of us who are sort of founders, for lack of a better word, but overall we're a community where we're just trying to bring people, women, and marginalized communities together and support each other and give each other great opportunities that normally are sometimes really hard to find because, you know, sometimes being a woman or a marginalized community is a little difficult in the gaming community. I'm sure we've never had a bad experience, right?
No, never. It's okay. Wonderful, thank you. Hi,
I'm Haiyue. I'm known as an vet online. I mostly tweet very tepid takes about Magic the Gathering and also my cats, so we should have that in common, Michelle. Most of the time, I'm split between different roles, but one of the main projects I do and the thing that I want to talk about most today is called the VML. We started out as a competitive league for people of marginalized genders. And by that I mean, back in the day when you went to a GP, there were like 1,000 men in a room, and you knew literally every single person who wasn't. And then all those people who knew each other got together and decided what to play Magic. We've now grown into this whole system that feeds into organized play, and we are trying to build a community and like a non-profit venture from that.
I am DeQuan, so most of you probably know me as Power Dragon, see me online probably everywhere. I guess my background, I would say, is pretty much everything other than working in distribution and gaming. I mean, I've literally run a game store, run tournaments, after-school programs, spent time working for Wizards, Card Kingdom, you know, and I feel like that gave me a really sound background as to what the actual community environment, whatever it looks like. And now I do commentary and podcast and YouTube and whatever, just an all-around content creator, kind of bringing all those experiences in and adding a different perspective to a lot of stuff that we didn't really have before. And it's been kind of surprising over the last 3 years how well people have responded to it. You know, how many times people have come up and just said, like, oh, there's actually a black guy that plays Magic. Like, this is cool. You know, like, I don't see that, you know. Or just giving a different perspective that people just don't have, you know, and that's been good just to, I think it's alleviated things and given people more comfort in the space. So, you know, that's kind of what I've been focusing on pretty heavily the last year and a half.
Wonderful. So, as far as I'm concerned, I ran the San Francisco chapter of the Lady Planeswalkers Society for several years and have done work there hoping to bring more and more marginalized folks into the community in the Bay Area. I live in Boston now, so we're going to work on that. But very quickly, pronouns. So I go by they, them, and she, her.
She, her.
I like where she goes.
I'm just he, him.
Wonderful. Okay, cool. With that, let's go ahead and start off the discussion. So, each of you, when did you start playing Magic, and what attracted you to this amazing game?
I started playing in like 2013, I think, all because my husband, when we were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, when we met, he was like, he knew how to play Magic, and he was going to teach me, and then he handed me a Chandra Firemaster card, and he's like, I think you're going to like her. And then it also kind of started my cosplay endeavors as well. I forgot to mention I cosplay as well. But yeah, and I was just, even though he totally was letting me win and then was like, nah, and then crushed me, I love it, and now I play better than him, and all the Magic cards in the house are mine.
Runner-up, best in show.
Yes, he did win runner-up best in show.
Woo!
Just a reminder to get close to those mics.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all good.
I usually talk really loud, I promise.
It's all good. Hi.
I started in about 2017. My boyfriend also taught me how to play Magic. No. I actually forced closer into playing Magic because I was fascinated with the cards. And I spent the first 3 months of learning Magic just watching Pro Tour videos on YouTube. And I did not understand anything. Like, I barely knew what the second main phase was. And I was just there watching. I'm just fascinated watching Gabby and BDM and all the Marshall, all the commentators, and just getting really drawn into people being so good at something. The thing that really fascinated me was how much work all of these players would put in to this game, and I wanted to be part of it.
Well, I didn't have a boyfriend teach me how to play Magic, but I actually picked it up on a field trip, believe it or not. To tell you how old I am, when I bought my packs, there was an unlimited booster and a revised booster still on the shelf. So I asked the guy, like, what's the difference between these? And he's like, well, revised has all these cards from like Arabian Nights and blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, oh, well, obviously that's the one I want. Hindsight and all. But I picked it up, ended up taking it home, reading the rule book on the way there, and then realized I needed a second deck. I was like, well, this kind of sucks. And then coincidentally, later that same week, a friend of mine came back. He's like, I was hanging out with my brother this weekend, and he was telling me about this game, and he's like describing it. I'm like, is it called Magic? He's like, yeah. And coincidentally, he had a starter deck. So then we played for the next like 6 hours with these just bum terrible starter decks. But like, that was it, just the strategy and, being able to pick up packs and change the decks, and it just opened up a whole new world of stuff. And that was like early 95, I think. And I'm still playing today, so yeah.
I started playing in 2014 when my startup at the time, which has since long imploded, decided to spend a lot of money buying a lot of booster boxes. Great use of investor VC money. And so the queer group I was part of within the startup inducted me into Magic by giving me 16 booster packs and just said, make a sealed deck out of this. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, it's okay. Also, Alesha is dragons, and I'm like, what? This is cool. So that's when I got into Magic, and I actually taught my husband how to play. So, yay, role reversal. But what attracted me to the game was, honestly, I had known about Magic the Gathering for a while because it was in my kind of orbit, my nerd orbit. But the kind of people who tended to play were, mostly your usual suspects. And so I always thought, this probably isn't for me. I don't really see anyone who looks like me or any of my friends in this game. And so I discovered that Alesha, who spells it death, was a character. And I immediately wanted to be part of this because I think it meant for me, like, oh gosh, there's room for me at this table. And I want to sling spells and kill people. So here I am. So what part of the Magic community do you feel like most attracted to at home? Because there are so many different parts of the Magic the Gathering community as illustrated by those wonderful cards like Timmy, Worthos, Spike, etc. So where have you found your home within the Magic pie, I suppose?
That's a good question, because I think I started out kind of going toward the competitive route, but then what I realized is there's a large chunk of the community that uses it almost as like escapism, I would say. And that's a much larger portion than I think even people realize. Like when you really start talking to folks, it's like, I leave work and then I can go hang out with my friends, or like, I'm a parent for these like 6 days and I can go out and just play Friday Night Magic or whatever it is. And I started to realize, like, I relate a lot more to those people than I think. Even now, when I'm doing basically my YouTube content for Arena, I show up to this and I play like no standard. I'm just playing casual, hanging out with people. And even then, using part of Magic still is just like something to do and get away and socialize and be around like a familiar group of people. And I think that's really what it is. It's just like that group that's just looking for something to get away, something to just enjoy low key. That's kind of where I'm at these days.
Nice.
Would you call it the gathering?
The gathering, yeah. I think that's what it is, actually. Funny they have a word for that.
For me, I literally carry a copy of Spike Tournament Rider in my deck box everywhere I go. It's the same thing that drew me in right at the beginning. It's that sense of not just competitiveness, but really trying to get the best out of yourself in such a difficult game, because it is incredibly difficult and incredibly complex. And when you watch the people who are really, really good, you suddenly realize that they're not even playing the same game as you, and that was really what drew me to it. There's just that urge to try and get better, and I'm so bad compared to the people that I look up to, but it's something to work towards. I love it.
I think for me it was, hey, get that. No, I'm just kidding. For me, the art was really what drew me in first, because obviously it was like, look at this pretty redhead who throws fire at things. And I was like, sign me up. And I've really gone through a lot of transformations, which I'm sure part of it we'll probably get into talking about a little bit later today, but because I wanted to try and be like competitive and do standard stuff, and then I had some really bad experiences. I'm sure a lot of us can probably relate to it, but we'll talk about it later. And then I found the cosplay community, and some of you may remember Moxie MTG. She took me under her wing. We helped form like the Planeswalker summits from way back in the Dizay. And I was like, this is the community. And I would go to events and I wouldn't even play Magic, actually. I'd mostly just like look at the art and be like, look, it's so pretty, and talk about the decks we would play. But yeah, now for me it's like definitely that cosplay community and more like playing Commander and trying to just make really silly decks. Like I have a shirtless folks deck, and it's really funny, and it's actually kind of good. But for me it's definitely a lot about like the art, and in Arena though I can get a little competitive because there is that anonymity there, just because you can't like see the other person. But yeah, not in person. Maybe one day.
For me, it was Alesha and then the story that immediately drew me in. I mean, the art was beautiful. I was really excited to play it with my friends, but hearing my friend / coworker tell me the story of Tarkir, the timeline, Sarkhan being really into dragons and then going back in time and getting all the dragons, it was really engrossing to me, and I didn't realize what potential a game like this had for really telling that story. And as a huge bookworm myself growing up, loving fantasy, having some of those genres and some of those concepts like distilled into game design was amazing. So I immediately just took that and ran, and eventually like became part of the Lord Waves. I started writing for Card Kingdom, doing character analysis, and since then it's just been a really wonderful part of my life in terms of finding like-minded folks and really helping to create a better, more welcoming environment for people like us. So just to also let you know, I should have done this at the top, but we will be discussing things like harassment most likely. There's going to be other more sensitive issues, because we are talking about issues and treatment of marginalized groups. So please be warned and please be advised. And if you need to step outside, that's totally fine. So with that, let's fast forward to, I guess, the present day. So in what ways do each of you think the Magic community and game have changed in terms of representation, inclusion, I guess, especially when we take it back to '93, like from then to today? How do you feel like the game has shifted?
I mean, when I looked around the room yesterday, I wasn't the only black guy in the room. Being real, there was, I can tell you about a time, this was at the second San Antonio Grand Prix years ago. I'm standing there talking with Steve Port, who's the guy who's running the event, and there's this guy over in the corner just keeps like staring at me or whatever, and this is way before I did content, whatever. I'm like, well, maybe he knew me from the store or something, whatever. So eventually, he's been waiting the whole time, wants to talk to me, and genuinely walks up to me, kind of real quiet, goes, do you know where I can pick up some weed? And I'm like, bro, like, really? Like, you waited like 10 minutes for that, you know? And I'm looking around going like, I get it. The only black guy in the room, you assume that I'm gonna know where the weed is, right? But, so stuff like that used to happen, you know, which doesn't happen anymore, which, that's huge, you know? But also, it's like, okay, it's still a smaller part of the community, but enough that it's not weird or different anymore. You know, that alone is a big change. And you're starting to see people come out, you know, like Orlando that cosplays Teferi everywhere. Like the fact that he's being used by Wizards and going to these events and whatever, and it's becoming a big normal thing now. Like that's something that didn't exist before. Hell, the fact that I'm doing a panel with 3 women in different parts of the industry, you know, that wouldn't have been a thing even 5 or 6 years ago, right? So those things are really big changes that you can visually see that I think are pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been in the game as long, I think it's the two of you, or the three of you. But when I started out, it was, like I said, like one of my first real experiences with the community as a whole, and not just my game store, which was very friendly, very nice. Was just going to my first GP. I was very excited, and I walked into the room, and it was just all men, like all mostly white men, and I'd just never been in that environment before, and I wasn't expecting it, and it was just this overwhelming feeling of, what am I doing here? Like, these are not my people. And honestly, that is part of why we started doing the VML and started doing these projects, because we didn't want other people to go through that. We didn't want other people to walk into a room and just be hit by this sudden wave of not belonging. And then, but now, I mean, and I really noticed this actually post-pandemic, where I think a lot of people got into the game through Arena, a lot of the people got into the game through playing at home or in their shared homes with their friends, Commander, etc. And it was so wildly different the first event back. I think it was Vegas 2 years ago was the first event back, and like it was Caroline is the co-chair of the VML with me, and we looked at each and we were like, we don't know every woman here. Between the two of us, we knew everybody, and it wasn't just that there were a few people we didn't know, it was that we couldn't even count the number of people, and that was fantastic. So I genuinely think at these big events, especially with the move towards the con kind of model, it has been so heartening just to see in the room the difference when you come to these big events.
Yeah, I definitely will say I've noticed that as well. To give another perspective, something I've noticed just a little bit more from like being a cosplayer, dressing up and playing Magic. Usually a lot of people will be like, is that your husband's deck? Or your boyfriend's deck? Did they teach you to play? Like, yeah, my husband taught me to play, but I'm better than him now. So like, and he knows. Yep, he said it's true. And I remember sitting down for like drafts, and this was even just back in like Origins time, because I was dressed as Baby Chandra, as I like to say it. And I don't know, when you get that feeling when you're sitting at a table with people sometimes, and it was just like, I felt very awkward, and like I didn't belong there, and like also being like the only woman at the table as well. But people just were like, what are you doing dressed up? This is so weird, and do you even know how to play? Why are you here? And that's totally changed now. And there's a lot of people to thank for that, and it's great. And now I can sit down dressed up, and people don't ask me, do I even know how to play? Sometimes it happens at like Comic-Con, but it's different group and setting of people. And they ask really nicely now, instead of like, do you play? It's mostly like, do you play? Like, what's your favorite color? Like more like that. So I've just noticed that tone shift as well, which is really nice, because I do like drafting and sealed in person and playing events with strangers, because that's the best way to make new friends. And it took a long time to get back into it, but I feel like it's definitely shifted a lot to today.
Yeah, I mean, can I just add to that a little? Like, certainly I think at the table, attitudes have changed a lot. Even in competitive, which I think is probably going to be the last section to become fully as diverse and inclusive as we would want it to, for a lot of reasons. But when I started going to competitive events, it was very, people would try to shock you because they think that you're an easy target. You know, they would try and get cheats off against you that they would not try against other people. I've had people literally who I've never spoken to in my life come pick up my deck and start looking through it and telling me what was wrong with it. Like, who I've never met before in my life.
That's crazy.
They're not even saying a word to me, just literally physically. And you'd be like, don't touch basketball, don't touch my deck. But it was, and nowadays I think that has really receded a lot. People are much more respectful of their opinions. People are much more, they're coming here and expecting you to be on an even footing with them as a competitor. And I think that's really what we want. Like, we don't want to be looked down on, we don't want to be patronized, you don't want to be condescended to. We also don't want people to treat you like you're different or special. We just want to sit down and be, we're both competitors and we're here to do our thing.
And to add to that, and I don't know what the current numbers are, but back around 2016, I believe, the females made up almost 30% of the Magic buyers,
Yeah.
but only 2% of organized play.
Yeah.
So to think that like women don't want to play competitively is not true. Like they exist, but the environment just hasn't been friendly for them.
No.
So a lot of them don't want to continue playing. And that's, so when people say like, well, maybe there's just women not playing Magic. Well, that's not true. They make up a very large chunk of the buying populace, just not the competitive populace, and there's reasons for that.
Yeah, it's for me, I love the efforts that have been made to, in the art and in the story, depict characters who are diverse and who have their own story, because that actually speaks to more people than you know. As we all do when we travel, I had my commander decks opened at TSA. So, what are these big black blocks in your luggage? So I actually had TSA open up my Aninatsu deck. And the woman who was looking through it, she looked at it, she read the title, like she read the commander card, Aninatsu, she said, oh, that's our mother's name. Like it turns out her heritage is from Mali. And so it was an amazing sort of moment where we got to bond over this character who she never, who shared her heritage, who had inspiration from her heritage. And she had never actually even thought of playing Magic at the moment. And of course, it was a little awkward. You maybe don't want to talk about this in the middle of busy TSA line. But I was definitely trying my best to tell her, like, hey, if we're really trying our best to bring people to the game. We want to bring more perspectives. Like, maybe you should try it out at your local game store. We're always, Magic's a great game, and have a nice day, and thank you. Have my cards back. But I think that is so important, like not just in terms of like representation of like people of color, but also queer representation. I mean, we have Nicola Eris. Girlfriends is back. Thank God.
Yeah.
We've got Dinobots with Botley and Sakina. We've got, finally Ral and Tommy got married, and it's just amazing. So it's been so gratifying to have those moments and have those moments be celebrated and be very visible, because I think that that's a really clear signal to other people, like the TSA agent. There's a space for you here. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about them. So, given the origins of the game and like the usual suspects, and all of you were kind of alluding to this earlier, each of us has had to overcome various weird barriers and challenges to even be part of this community. So given those challenges, do you still feel like you're trying to overcome them? How do you feel like your relationship with the game has endured despite those?
I'd say I still have trouble trying to play like something even just standard, like competitively in person. That's still really difficult for me. But like I said, Arena is helping me get over that, because I've been able to play decks and people are like sharing a lot more of ideas in the decks they make. Because I'm not a great deck builder. Like I could probably maybe like edit one a little bit, but that's something that's still a little difficult for me. But I feel like a community and a panel like this and just being at this event with everyone here is a stepping stone for me personally. Like one day maybe I will actually try and play standard again. And it'll be really cool. And maybe I'll lose and I'll be really happy about it. Maybe I'll win and I'll be really happy about it. But the point is I just want to have a really good time. And so that's it.
Sign up for season 10 of the DML. It's open Monday. So
Okay, well,
there's your chance.
And I totally forgot the question now, but I think that was my answer.
Basically it's the challenges you're facing in the community, and how do you feel like you're overcoming them and still enduring?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, you got that. You did great.
Yeah, you did.
You did wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so in the competitive community, the major thing that people remember from a couple of years ago when there were some efforts to improve diversity in the Mythic Championship level, and I think there was some controversy because they were giving out like invites to people who are maybe content creators or maybe not, who didn't qualify through the whatever the qualification
normal-
system.
The traditional.
The traditional means. And people were very, very, very upset about special invites or special treatment, etc. And then a lot of those people went on to do pretty well, but then a lot of those people went on to do not great. And really, there's something that we talk about in the VML all the time, where the invite is not enough, because the invite is just the beginning. Like, the reason that people of marginalized genders have been locked out of this community isn't just because they couldn't get that foot in the door. It's because once they were in the door, everybody else already had testing teams, they had networks of people who would support them, they would borrow cars from each other, they would be invited to come stay in the PT testing house for 2 weeks before the tournament starts. And those groups are just traditionally very, very closed off. It was very about who you knew, who you were friends with, and very, very difficult for people to work with people of marginalized genders. It was just not a thing. And Awesome, who, by the way, is in the top 8 of the pro squad right now. And a huge top four. The pro tour right now. She's just such an inspiration. She told me that it was only until she won Mythic Championship 1 that the testing teams in the UK would work with her. And she had won English Nationals twice at that point. And she'd been a silver pro for years and years and years. And people didn't want to work with her until she won Mythic Championship 1, which is just wild. And also, those players, who's heard of another English Magic player than Awesome? So it's just, I don't know, that's the kind of network and the support systems that were just really lacking for us. And that was the reason that you couldn't just give people an invite and expect them to do well. And I think it was pretty, maybe too optimistic for those who wanted to improve diversity in the game to just say, oh, let's invite some people and it looks good for this show, but what's going on in the long term. And so part of what we do is that every season we build testing teams. We have this whole program where you can sign up and we will put you in a group with people who are not in your division, so you're not going to play against them, and they all have they all work together and they all build their decks together and try to get their practice in. And we're basically trying to build from the ground up these networks that have existed organically in the PT scene for the last 20 years, and we're just doing it. We're just trying to make that happen for people in our community. And something great that came out of that was the Sanctum team, which was led by Aria before she went to work in play design at Wizards. And they were a Pro Tour testing team that are open to anybody of marginalized genders who qualifies. They're welcome to test them, and we consider them like a sister project to the VML. And they are now they break the format all the time. They came up with the Ratterblade combo deck that broke standard. And just time after time, year on year, they're getting better and better. And when we talked to Wizards originally about the changes we wanted to make, I think maybe it wasn't clear to them, and it probably also wasn't clear to us, that a Pro Tour competitor is not made in a year, right? A PT Top 8 competitor is not made in 2 years of playing VMLs. But maybe in 5 years of playing VMLs, or in 10 years, this group of people will have developed those skills and that experience to get a whole cohort into, what we consider the top echelon.
Yeah, building that equity over time. Absolutely. DeQuan?
Actually, if I can have story time for a second, I basically have 3 things that kind of shape my content and my focus. The first is, for those you don't know, I took over a game store in October 99. I was 21, the Gamma trade show for industry people. And I went there for the first time, I think it was 03. And I'm walking around and I'm talking to people, and I'm noticing something, that when they talk to each other and the other owners, it's, what's your store, where's it at, what's the name of your business? But they're asking me, who do you work for? Right? And that was the first indicator of oh, okay, I'm the different one in the space, right? And that's okay. That's just one of the things in your head, you kind of make a tick mark, right? And I don't think anybody was being outwardly racist. I think it was just the nature of the industry, right? There weren't any black game store owners. right? So that's one of those things, it's like, okay, this is gonna be a hurdle to overcome. And you kind of just put it aside, right? Now, this next one, I will tell you, my store was in Texas, make of that what you will, but I was running an event, this is a little later, maybe around '07, and there was some stuff that was out of our control, but you know, we're going out, making good with the people in line, we're gonna give them some free stuff and you know, free event entries and whatever. And had two parents, and I swear to you, said F N-words, this is why N-words shouldn't be in charge of running events. In front of their kids and everybody, right? And it's just like, really, this is what you, and I felt so bad for the kids because you could tell it was something that happened regularly, right? And it's just like, okay, put that one there. And then more recently, when the whole George Floyd stuff went down, we were having discussions on our podcast about like, how do you get to this space where this is a thing that people aren't like shocked about? And just randomly, we had a conversation about like, when did people have their first black teacher? You know, and we started thinking, because a lot of people don't have black people in positions of authority when they're growing up. And I kind of just posted that on Twitter and on Facebook in a couple of groups and went to play, actually it was the first arena open, right? I just went to go play it, actually won, got $2,000, so that was nice. But then I come back and like all my mentions are blown up. Like I'm the dude on the side of like people trending on Twitter and I'm like, oh God, what happened? Right? Because literally where like you don't want to click a thing because you're like, oh I said something and someone, oh God, what did I do? Yeah, so I'm like running everything through my head. Go to click on it and this thing has like, at the time, 44,000 responses. Like literally over the course of that week I had discussions like Chelsea Clinton responded to it, like there was a newspaper in Ottawa, I think it was, like it showed up on a dude's thing on ESPN, one of the comedians was talking about it on their podcast, and it was like, okay, this is a thing that resonates with people. And even, I had people still responding to it recently, I think it's at like 68,000 responses. And that told me like, hey, maybe we also don't have that in Magic. So even now, when you look at my content, I can tell you when I make a video, everything is very purposely done. Like even opening up full screen is so you're normalizing having a conversation with a black guy for the first like 20 seconds of the video. Like things that people don't think about. I've basically used those three things to say, okay, let's use this to shape stuff and make it different and make it stand out and create that normalcy in the space. And it's amazing the efforts that it's having, honestly, and the results we're getting from it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. For my part, it's always, as Haiyue and Airbubbles has alluded to, there is something about being the only marginalized person in the room that suddenly puts a ton of pressure on you. And for me, before I decided to become an artist, I was in the tech industry for a while. And I often found myself in a room of like white, cis, straight dudes who, as software engineers, believed that they knew everything about everything and really loved people like Elon Musk. And so I found myself taking on this persona of needing to be as just constantly affirming my own intelligence in front of these folks, constantly trying to show up and constantly trying to make sure that my personhood was respected. And that is something that carried over into Magic when I started playing. And being Asian American, that also kind of came into play as well because, you know, I'm in a mixed race relationship with my husband, and so unfortunately there's a lot of really bad stereotypes about Asian women and submissiveness and all that stuff. And so suddenly being face to face with that in an environment like this, in my local game store sometimes, it was definitely really, really tricky to navigate because at the same time, you know, I don't want to have to feel my own internalized misogyny, my own internalized racism. So it's been a journey for me to sort of tackle that and also create a more authentic presence within the community and within my local friend group of who I am, and through, I guess, that little microcosm, hopefully be able to ripple effect like through the community, the gathering. We did touch on this a little bit in terms of support, but we can't do this alone, right? That's why we're the gathering. So I know you mentioned Moxie, you have got the VML going on. Who else in the community has been incredibly helpful in terms of supporting you, keeping you here, helping you thrive?
I mean, I mentioned She Sparks, and that's, for lack of a better phrase, like Talia is the brainchild of it. It was like her idea, and I kind of randomly got a message one day, and she's like, hey, we're gonna have a booth at the Magic event you were talking about, the Vegas one, the first one that came back like 2 years ago-ish, and she's like, I want to have a group of like women here to really be like a positive force and like a safe space. And we've definitely housed like people who are just like, I'm so stressed out right now, I just need to like go sit down because I had a really bad interaction, or like they would just unload for like 5 minutes and they'd be like, or I just need a quiet space, I don't want to talk about it, I just need to sit here. And that's what we were doing, and it was so fulfilling, and like, because I definitely was at this point in my tech career, like you were talking about this, like I used to work, we were being in meetings where it was the only woman in the room, and I literally was like paid less, and like even a male counterpart tried to go to my boss and was like, why is Ariel paid less when she has more experience? And just to tell you the reason, they said it's because at the time I did not have a AAA title under my belt, even though I had more years of experience. So anyway, and it was just like, I don't know, it was really gross. And then of course having the in-person experiences I'd had with like Magic and trying to play, and just feeling like this outcast. And it was kind of getting better, but I don't know, like the moment I kind of got to be a part of that group and community and meet people and like actually feel like helping, like being a helping hand, and just being like, come be safe with us, or come put your merch on our table, just come be positive with us, so let's help each other out. It was really great, and it kind of like instilled this like hope in me that I felt like was really waning. And I know that was really recent, but I mean like the pandemic really did a number, I'm sure, on a lot of people's mental health, and even like just self-esteem in general. So yeah, I really got to thank like Talia and Zebex and Zabricus and Anna Margaret, because she's been with us as well. I could list so many people, honestly. But yeah, it's been a really amazing group and community, a part of it. Of course, like early on Moxie, just like a lot of times when I'm feeling down, I go and look at pictures from those initial Planeswalker summits, and it just like, I don't know, I feel like this warmth inside. Yeah, and I think it was actually, I don't remember, I think Zabricus was the one that encouraged me to do my first like arena tournament, and I was really scared, but I made day 2, and which was wild to me. I know it's like just like a little baby step there.
Small victory.
It's great.
I was like, I think that same time I made like Diamond and like Historic, and I was like, what is happening right now? Can I actually play this game? And I think Zabricus was the one that like pushed me to like, you should play, like come on and play, it's gonna be great. And I was like, okay. So yeah, and even though it was like sort of an online thing that encouraged you, it was just like really cool. So.
Yeah, I got to talk about Caroline. I really started back in the UK when I was still living there. And actually, weirdly, Autumn was one of the people that kind of opened my eyes to Magic and what the competitive scene is like. She used to come to the game store that I went to, that I started out at. I remember one time she was playing against my boyfriend. I was watching their, I think it was Hour of Devastation, the draft game. And the plays she was making were just insane, just absolutely, I'd never seen anything like it. I was, wow. And then when we moved here, I met Caroline pretty early on, and she introduced me to all of this. And when we started doing the VML together, like, there is no way that either of us could have done it, or done anything close to what we have built by ourselves. Because as some of you might know me, some of you don't, but I'm pretty, I would say, direct and forthright with the way that I treat people, and Caroline is very lovely and diplomatic, and she's very good at restraining some of my more impulsive tendencies, and also she's good at numbers, which I'm not good at. And when it was really that process of working on this with her, and all these people wanting to help, wanting to donate money, wanting to donate their time, and everybody in the organization is still, chronically underpaid. We're trying our best, and that was like a huge moment of realization for me when people wanted to contribute to what we were doing, and they were inspired by it. And now we have, hundreds, thousands of people in the server And so many times, you know, you ask for help on something and a million people will appear, or people will just come up and maybe they never post, but then they have a few spare arena codes from their pre-release and they'll come in and be like, anyone want these codes? And they'll just give them away. And it's this, just seeing the effect that we've had on people has been really transformative, I think. And something that I also wanted to really talk about in this area was actually our interactions with Wizards, because you know, when we started out, we kind of just shot our shot at Wizards, and we were like, okay, look, we want invites, right? We think we have a competitive event, we think it's as hard as any other qualifier, we think we deserve invites. And really, it was the play team at Wizards, and they just really gave us a chance. They said, okay, why not? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Maybe, I assume that's how the conversation went. And it turned out the worst that could happen is that we never let go and keep asking for more and more. And you know, here we are today with 128 people playing every season for 10 weeks, and regional championship invites and pro tour invites attached to, you know, our capstone event. And throughout that whole process, you know, it was very heartening seeing the very real support from Wizards of the Coast to do what we do, because they could easily, you know, give lip service to it, or just, you know, have a little nod and kind of move on. But actually, you know, their legitimizing of us has helped us legitimize everything that we do in our community. And I think, you know, even among the I'm going to say paper boomers, but I don't know how to say that. But, you know, even among the kind of very old school, hardcore, like Magic pros, now there's a lot of recognition of what we do, and they know it's very difficult. Like our event, probably, honestly, genuinely one of the hardest qualifying events you can play. And it's really because of the kind of initiative from the top to say, yes, we're going to support this openly. You know, we're going to show that this is our stance on it, and I think that has been fantastic.
Yeah, and to give some extra credit to the Wizards there, I think it's also, like, you know, even working with Kat and our arena team and stuff, like, the people they're choosing to work with and the people that they're featuring in videos, or even for the commentary team, you know, it's like, it's you, it's Paul, it's Cedric, you know, like, I think people seeing that sort of changes things and normalizes a lot of it, and that's a really big thing we don't talk about enough. You know, even for these events, bringing out all these cosplayers and whatever that tend to be from some of these more marginalized groups, it's making a difference, you know. And I would also say, you know, for myself, there was a stretch even during the pandemic, I think, where getting support from some of the bigger creators made a big difference too. You know, I got to do some stuff with the Professor, Covert Go Blue, I mean, all the efforts from MTG Nerd Girl and all the stuff she's doing. I think those have really helped shape the space as well too, because there's a big casual community still out there. There's a lot of people that just watch Magic for entertainment, and making sure there's diversified voices in those spaces has really made it easier for other people to kind of feel comfortable taking a shot. You know, it's still surprising to me when people message me and be like, well, the only reason I started streaming is because, like, you showed me it was okay, right? Like, now, to be fair, they're not seeing all the, you know, people have to swap behind the scenes, but, you know, just there being a positive presence and a voice that's being put in front of them has made a big difference. So, you know, I think there's a lot of people involved in making it work. Because like you said earlier, it's not, we can do everything we want, but if everybody else isn't supportive of those things, it's still going to be fighting an uphill battle.
Absolutely. For myself, I mean, I'm so blessed to have my partner support me, and in so many of these efforts we have the same goals and values. And, you know, reaching out to so many other people in the Vorthos community who are so supportive and wonderful. I mean, Hobbs over here, we got Taya here, I've got like Princess and Kathleen, and like there's so many really amazing people who have reached out and helped really foster my perspective and made me feel welcome in this space. I mean, the Vorthos community has always been very, very tiny, but we're strong, we're very vocal. And it's very rewarding to find someone else who cares so much about these people who don't exist as much as you do, who understand the impact of the representation, and who want more, who want better for not only these characters, but for us as well. And on that note, because I do So it seems like we are going to be probably like shunting Q&A to after the panel, since we've got so many amazing things to talk about. We will, I think some of us will be around to answer questions if you'd like to, but to round things out and looking ahead to the future, what can we do as individuals, because as part of the gathering, what can we do to help continue this upwards trend of diversifying, welcoming more marginalized people to the space and helping them stay?
And I think there's really a two-part thing, and this sort of comes up a little bit on our podcast, is one, we kind of have to be able to stand up for each other. Because there's a lot of things, like especially when talking with women, that I don't know are problems as a guy, right? Until they bring it up. But then when I see it, I have to help stop it, or at least make it easier for them in some way. And I think, you can say you're a supporter, but if you're not taking action or doing anything, then like it's all lip service. That's probably the biggest part. And then the other is understanding, if you don't understand the space, don't try to speak for those people. We've had people yell at us on our podcast about why we didn't say more or do more on certain topics, and at the end of the day, it's like, well, I'm not a trans person. I can only give so much of a perspective, and then after that, unless I have a guest on the show, I can't speak for them. We can be supportive and tell you why I think this is a problem, but I'm not going to go in and try to figure out how somebody feels or whatever. Like, let them say that. Let them have the space, and make it okay for them to have the space. That's the other thing. So I think as a community, we have to keep doing those things so it becomes more normalized.
I mean, that just 100% really on what you said, DeQuan, because we also get those messages all the time, like, why isn't this league also for people of color, right? Why isn't this space also? And it's like, first of all, like, we can only do so much. But also, it's not just that, it's that, like, we're not here, it's not like this is a nebulous group called marginalized people, and they all want the same thing, and, we can service all of them. Like, that's just not the truth. And kind of the real work that has to be done in addressing these problems is, first of all, recognizing what the problems are and what they are in terms of how they apply to specific people and specific groups. And so a while ago, one day, I think it was during the Blizzard Activision scandal.
Oh gosh.
It was so awful. And one day I woke up and I was very, very angry about it. As soon as I woke up, at 7 a.m., I texted the editor of CFB then, their articles person. I was like, I want to write an article. So I've only ever written one Magic-related article, and it was called 5 Steps to Breaking Down Gender Barriers in Magic. And really the first one is recognize that there's a problem, because so many people are still at the stage of there's not a problem, or it's going to slowly get better over time, which is one of my least favorite things to hear, as if that just naturally happens. But even, a while ago, the VML had this huge kind of burst of attention because we were very lucky to have been supported with an advert on the Arena client, and that day the server like tripled in size in a day. It was like completely wild. And after that, there was a big wave of actual like hostile messages and attacks from the usual suspects, right? And we were expecting it, so it was fine. But a recurring theme was we got these messages saying, "Why are you making the Magic community look bad by saying that there's a problem?" Like, the fact they were more angry at us for pointing out a problem than willing to consider that there is a problem, and also that they're being part of the problem by saying that. And without that kind of recognition, there's the rest of it can't follow. But once you have that recognition, really, I think on an individual level, there's a lot you can do, obviously, but I really hate also putting the responsibility on every ally to be their best person at all times, which they should, obviously, we want everyone to be that. But really, the change is going to come for me, at like a higher level, at the higher levels, like at the game store level. If you run a game store, like, who are you hiring? Who are you banning from the store? What kind of community are you fostering? If you're working in if you're working at events, like what kind of judges are you hiring? What kind of people are you putting in those positions of authority? What kind of events are you running? Like how are you scheduling them? Have you considered that people who have, unduly burdened with more childcare problems can't just take whole weekends off to play Magic? Like there's just all these things that are not necessarily directly discriminating, but they're just things that aren't really thought about. And I think like the thing that really interests me is that I would love to see a lot of work done at the local store, especially kind of area, because that's most people's interface with Magic, to kind of really, on a structural level, give a more accessible experience.
And to tag onto that, for anybody who thinks there's not problems, I had a video where I was just jokingly talking about like the Snoop Dogg, Martha Stewart cooking show. But I've never seen that. It's brilliant. You should watch it. Literally got comments from people saying like, "Oh, you need to be careful about mentioning Snoop Dogg, or your stuff's going to be too urban for a lot of your viewers." Literally, I mean, that's a thing that happens. Like, so if you think there are problems, there are definitely problems. But yeah, everybody.
My first thought is, it seems like so like ridiculous, but it is like, introduce more kids to Magic. Like there's way more young people playing Magic. I know it's like a 13+ game, but if they can play it, it's great. It's educational. They're like the forefront of like the next group of Magic players. Look at Dana Fisher. When she was younger, I know she's still young, but when she was younger, I was actually genuinely, like when she was creeping up on them teen years, I was genuinely starting to be concerned, like, is there going to be a shift when she hits 13, that people are going to start being gross? Because, like, as a woman in the Magic community, I've definitely received gross comments and people being gross towards me, and I was like really scared. But then like seeing the response of when she's been doing more competitive things, and even talking to her, because she's just like very blunt and straight to the point. Like she's like, yeah, I crushed that person, and then that's the answer. She'll give people, and you're like, okay, we're good. And I think her dad's done a really great job fostering that as well. So watching that and seeing the generation, even like the kids younger than her that she's inspired, is crazy. And I'm just like, yes, I want to keep seeing this be fostered, especially because she's a girl playing Magic. Awesome. And then being part of the She Sparks booth, we've been working a lot with DreamHack, and recently we were on like the main show floor, which was really weird at first, because we were right by like a Rocket League booth, which I'm not gonna lie, Rocket League is actually very interesting. I kind of need to play now, but we got a lot of different like people coming up, a lot of kids, a lot of different groups who've never heard of Magic before, and like while She Sparks is sort of generalized for gaming, we're all from the Magic community, and I saw like Zebex take some kids back and like teach them to play Magic, like young kids, and even like I introduced one guy to Magic. He went to go play with Magic Kids and comes back with a stack of cards like this big, and he's like, look at all these cards I just got, and he's like, I want it to be like this big. And I was like, all right, we've made a problem.
What he doesn't know is that's happening as he's standing there.
So just kind of like firsthand seeing that transformation is great. And then you kind of touched on this earlier about like sort of the larger creators being able to use their platform to really boost up smaller creators, marginalized creators, and things like that is very helpful. It's like the analogy of like, boosting someone up and then them reaching a hand down and then boosting someone else up. Like, I like that, but there's a lot of people who do that. They'll get boosted up and then they just walk away and they don't help the next person. And I've had that happen a few times to myself. I've boosted someone up and then they're just like, bye. and it sucks, but you're like, well, I did that and I'm happy I helped them. Who else can I boost up, And that's really the big thing, not to be super cheesy, but it's just like we just have to help each other. We have to help boost each other up. And while She Sparks is still like a really like baby platform and community, that's kind of the goal, is to just really be able to do that with people, whether it's helping kids get into Magic and showing them that anybody can do it. And that's why the slogan's like, you can sit with us, because you can. Come sit with us. Let's play Magic. Let's talk about cosplay. Let's talk about video games, whatever. That's I think the cheesy message is like helping each other out, and like the kids are the next generation, and they're gonna do what we show them, basically. Like they're sponges.
Very cute sponges.
Yes.
I feel like the three of you already covered most of my talking points. So I think what I'm going to focus on is the things that I've done, I guess, within my LGS and when I was running Lady Planeswalkers to try to create on a micro level again that sense of trying to appeal to and keep marginalized people in the community. So, things I would do immediately if I saw that there was someone in doing Friday Night Magic or whatever, I would introduce myself immediately. I would just say, hi, I'm here. If if something happens, you can always come to me, and establishing yourself as a safe point for them to rely on and to support them. Of course, you should only do this if you're capable of it, but establishing yourself as that rallying point is always really great within a space. Another thing too is just trying to, especially for people who don't necessarily have the financial means to buy tons of cards. One of the things that we love to do at my local game store was just give kids a draft chaff. Like at the very end of the night, we're done, we played our limited decks, here you go, have a stack of cards. And the kids, of course, just be like, yes, all the cards. And also just making sure that when you have events, that you have product and you have things available for people to use and to interact with immediately. Being able to walk in through the door and just sit down and give someone a pack, give someone a deck, and let them play, that's wonderful. And that helps eliminate so much of the awkwardness and fear that many marginalized people will have when they come into an unfamiliar space like this. So hopefully those are some useful tips. I'm sure there's plenty more that everyone can do in order to make this space feel more welcoming, but that's how we do it. We gotta build up on each other, and as a group, we will help keep this momentum going. So thank you all for coming. We're running right on time. But before we leave, where can we find all of you?
So I can be found pretty much everywhere under Airbubbles or Airbubbles Cosplay, and then like I said, the She Sparks page, we have, I think we have Instagram and a Twitter and a TikTok. I don't remember, but it's She Sparks. I usually just Z-Bex usually handles all the social media stuff. I'm not gonna lie, but it's She Sparks with a Z, so that's also there. We're actually gonna be in DreamHack Dallas. If anyone's gonna be there, we'll be there with a booth and be present. You can talk to us and hang out. But yeah, I will not be here for more questions after because I'm doing the VIP Black Lotus event. So yeah, I came here on the New Perspectives grant, so I'm really excited. That's why I'm like, I want to do this. We're never gonna get this.
I'm Haiyue Yu. You can find me on Twitter and Effect. I'm PhD. I'm generally, so commentary is another thing that I do, so I'm covering probably some upcoming shows. I don't know what I'm supposed to say yet. But I have been covering the marks. I have been covering the marks and arena championships and stuff like that. But I will say, please come and join the VML community on Discord. We're on Twitter, VMLMTG. And if anyone that you think would benefit from being in the group, for sure, come join it. It was pretty competitive focused to start with, but it's not just that now. And something that is pretty exciting is that we're actually in the process of filing for a non-profit organization. So, so we're hoping really to take it to the next level and repeat some of the stuff that we did, like the Safe Place Space we did in Vegas last year, and stuff like that, once we get a bit more funding and sponsorship going. So yeah, coming soon, TM.
You can find me just about everywhere at Power Dragon, POWRDRAGN, pretty much everywhere. I also have a podcast called Color of Magic, where we focus on the more serious issues that affect gamers at and away from their gaming tables and computers, as we like to tell people. And if you want the info, I have cards and stuff I can give you with that on there. But yeah, pretty much just come find me online. I'm always good for a conversation.